The government believe the threat of more terrorist attacks is even more real.
I believe there will be more attempts, more attacks, and what we want to do is prevent them if we can.
I believe that we could expect the next shoes to drop to be something different than hijacking airplanes. And the reason is because what the terrorists are trying to do is to create a pervasive sense of fear among the American people.
Some U.S. officials say they cannot rule out that there may still be suspected terrorists at large in this country. In the weeks since the attack, the U.S. has continuously received intelligence from a number of overseas and domestic sources that more terrorists who support Osama bin Laden are poised to strike. Sources tell ABC News that recently, U.S. intelligence has received about 200 threats per day, some of which are believed to be credible. There are intelligence reports that extremists are conducting surveillance on American targets overseas. But those threats have not been specific. No specific times, no specific places. ABC News has learned that in the past week, the FBI quietly began shifting resources from solving the hijacking assault to preventing more attacks.
I think the real concern is that there's an undiscovered cell here in the United States.
I think now that the strikes have occurred, we'll see even more stringent security.
In response, U.S. officials say they are taking no chances, increasing security at installations across the U.S., not just at airports, but at some dams, nuclear facilities, and water treatment plants. There is also a project underway to make the windows at the U.S. Capitol more blast-resistant, less likely to shatter. Now the dilemma for the administration, Peter, how to warn the public without causing a panic.
Exactly, Pierre. Thanks very much, Pierre Thomas, outside FBI headquarters in Washington, not at the Bureau. We were reminded today of where this round began almost a month ago with the attack on the trade towers and at the Pentagon. The president today went to Emmitsburg in Maryland to pay tribute to fallen firefighters there. This is the Firefighters Memorial, and the president actually went to honor the 99 firefighters who were killed in the line of duty last year. But naturally, he paid tribute to the more than 300 New York City firefighters who are presumed, pretty much guaranteed to have died in the attack on the World Trade Center. Down at the Trade Center, the digging continues. That's an operation which never ceases, no matter what day of the week it is. We now are told by the city of New York that 4,687 people are missing and presumed to be dead, and 403 people are confirmed to be dead. We'll continue this broadcast in just a moment. Perhaps we shouldn't have been surprised today, but it was quite jarring to suddenly see Osama bin Laden himself on television in a, as it turned out, pre-recorded message before the U.S. attacked in Afghanistan today, giving his pre-recorded message of what he believed would and or should happen as a result of these attacks. We saw it on John Miller is with us and has been looking at it closely. We saw this on Al Jazeera television, just as people in the region did. Can you take us through what he had to say?
Well, sure. What bin Laden was saying is, once again, not claiming responsibility for the attacks, but praising them and calling for holy war on the part of his followers and others, and decrying the Muslim nations who decided to become allies with the United States in this.
I thought the most chilling thing he said, in one respect, was that Americans would not be safe until Israel was out of what he described as Palestine and the United States was out of Saudi Arabia.
He said that we will not be safe. We will never feel safe before they feel safe.
Yeah. Do you have some tape of this?
Yes, we do.
God attacked America at its heart and destroyed its greatest building. We thank God for this, and now America is full of fear, from north to south, from east to west.
Osama bin Laden praised the attacks on the World Trade Center as God's work and reveled in America's fears of future attacks. Surrounded by his top lieutenants, he urged all Muslims to join the holy war against America and its allies.
It is very clear after these events that every Muslim should be ready.
The tape was meant to respond to the American airstrikes. Apparently it was shot hours or even days before the nighttime strikes. Bin Laden said what Americans suffered in recent attacks pales in comparison to what Palestinians and other Muslims have experienced.
And what America is tasting today is just a little of what we have tasted for decades.
In the videotape, bin Laden cited the U.S. sanctions and bombing of Iraq, the violence against Palestinians, and the continued presence of U.S. forces in his homeland of Saudi Arabia, all of which he said was justification for the attacks on America.
This is the least which could be said about them. They supported murder, so God has given them back what they deserve.
Professor Fawaz Gerges of Sarah Lawrence College says the attacks and today's video message are all part of bin Laden's master strategy.
Bin Laden is saying this is the day that the United States is unleashing a clash of civilizations against the Muslim world. It's a reckoning day. It's about time that Muslims stand up and defend their religion and defend Islam.
Taking a page from President Bush's speech, in which he said, nations are either with the United States or they are with the terrorists, bin Laden said Muslims are either with this holy war or they are non-believers.
These events have split the world into two camps, the camp of believers and the camp of disbelievers.
Of course, bin Laden's message clear and chilling, his whereabouts still a mystery. Peter?
Many thanks, John Miller. We'll continue the broadcast in just a moment. In the Middle East today, by which we mean Israel and the Palestinian territories specifically, there was one overt act of violence. A Palestinian bomber blew himself up in northern Israel and killed himself and one Israeli who had gone to accost him. This attack on Afghanistan has put both the Israeli government and the Palestinian Authority, led by Yasser Arafat, very much on edge, as it has everybody else. Our bureau chief, Gillian Findley, is with us tonight from Jerusalem. Gillian, can you tell us first how the Israelis have reacted to this and then how the Palestinians reacted?
Well, there's been no official reaction, Peter, from Prime Minister Ariel Sharon, but his foreign minister, Shimon Peres, has come out and said this was the right and courageous act taken by the United States today. On the Palestinian side, interestingly, no reaction at all, not from any PA official. This is a very sensitive issue for them, as I'm sure you're aware. They're worried about the people on the street. This will not be a popular war here, especially if large numbers of Afghanis, large number of Muslims end up being killed.
Is it true, as I've heard, that Yasser Arafat has tried to crack down even more forcefully on Palestinian extremists?
Yes, especially in the last couple of days, he's been under tremendous pressure from the United States in particular to start arresting people that the United States, that Israel believes is responsible for some of the acts of terrorism here. And he has done that. He has put out orders. He has actually started arresting people, which he hasn't done in many, many months here. And the implication is that he is taking this much more seriously than he ever has in the past.
Many thanks, Gillian Findley in Jerusalem. A lot we want to get in. We'll be back in just a moment.
For big savings on brake service, stop into Meineke. You'll get 50% off, lifetime brake pads and shoes. But you better hurry before these big savings are gone.
At Meineke, you won't pay a lot, but you'll get a lot.
Out here, I'm in command. So am I supposed to say, slow down, guys, I'm constipated? I don't think so. You try to eat right, sometimes you can't. Harsh chemical laxatives, they can kick in whenever and wherever. Not an option. So I rely on doctor-recommended Metamucil. It's got 100% natural fiber. Works with my body, gently, which is important to a sensitive guy like myself.
Metamucil, the doctor's natural choice for regularity.
It's been 1 week since you looked at me. Cause you heard the design and I'm angry. 5 days since you laughed at me, saying that together come back and see me. Yesterday, you've forgiven me, but it'll still be today till I say I'm sorry. Like vanilla, it's the finest of the flavors. And it's the show cause I know the vertigo is at my door. And the banger is your life to sign a waiver. I have a tendency to wear my mind up my sleeve. It's been 1 week since you looked at me. Dropped your eyes to the sides and said I'm sorry.
Imagine combining the stain-fighting power of Efferdent and freshening power of Listerine. You'd get Efferdent Plus. It's extra fresh, and nothing gets your dentures cleaner. Efferdent Clean, Listerine Fresh. That's Efferdent Plus.
Tonight, the season's #1 new drama, Alias, goes the next round.
This is what you're in the middle of, Sydney, and it is long-term.
I think I found it. I have to ask you now.
The show Entertainment Weekly calls the best new drama, and it's only the beginning. All new Alias, ABC tonight, 9/8 Central.
There is so much to be said about all this today. Not long from now, ABC News is going to devote 2 more hours to a special broadcast on everything that's happened today and the ramifications both in the region and the potential ones here in the United States. But just to review the top one, airstrikes by the U.S. and British forces occurred in Afghanistan today, directed against the Taliban and against Osama bin Laden's network there. We do not know the results of the initial attacks. But I'm Peter Jennings, and that is this edition of World News Tonight, Sunday. I hope you'll join us later.
This is an ABC News special.
The United States has attacked Afghanistan 26 days after terrorists attacked the United States.
The battle is now joined on many fronts. We will not waver. We will not tire. We will not falter. And we will not fail. Peace and freedom will prevail.
Osama bin Laden thanks God for last month's terrorist attacks and says Americans will not be safe.
Whoever lives in America will never have security before we have security in Palestine. Until the infidel armies get out of the Islamic land, they will never have security.
The U.S. efforts to get at bin Laden's Afghan operation today, a very complicated U.S. military operation. The United States itself goes on high alert, and there is an effort to keep life running smoothly. The criminal investigation that bin Laden's lieutenants now claim responsibility for. And going to war on a Sunday afternoon, another day in the national life interrupted.
Tonight, America fights back. Now reporting from New York, Peter Jennings.
Good evening, everyone. It has been another extraordinary day here and, of course, in Afghanistan. We begin by assuming that you have heard at least the bare essentials of what happened today, and here are some of them. The United States has attacked Afghanistan, U.S. and British forces. They've used bombers and they've used submarines. The British launched a cruise missile from one of their submarines. Airports and training camps belonging to Osama bin Laden were the primary targets in Afghanistan. The attack continues. There's been quite an extraordinary statement from Osama bin Laden himself, and the U.S. was also preparing and has been preparing some time ago to drop food shipments to those Afghans who are clearly on the run in many cases outside the areas of the country which are controlled by the Taliban. As I said, the attack is still, as far as we know, going on. The U.S. attacking targets all over Afghanistan in an attempt to undermine the Taliban government there and to get at the Afghan operation of Osama bin Laden. Now, this is an attack with consequences. We do not yet know what they are. First, here's an excerpt from what President Bush had to say today.
Initially, the terrorists may burrow deeper into caves and other entrenched hiding places. Our military action is also designed to clear the way for sustained, comprehensive, and relentless operations to drive them out and bring them to justice.
And then, somewhat to our surprise, we heard from Osama bin Laden himself in a taped message which was recorded before these attacks began and given to one of the Arabic television networks, which then gave it to us. Mr. bin Laden had this, among other things, to say.
The world is divided into 2 sides. The side of faith and the side of infidelity. Now, every Muslim has to stand up and support Islam and support Muslim brothers in order to wipe out this act of aggression.
The battle lines were drawn between Osama bin Laden and much of the world even before today. Today just simply makes them even clearer and even sharper. And in these next 2 hours, we will try to understand what the U.S. and Afghanistan and many, many other countries have got themselves into now that the United States has struck back at the terrorist operation which attacked New York and the Pentagon almost a month ago. And we're going to start as close to the battlefield of the day that we can. We're going to go first to ABC's David Wright, who is with what's called the Northern Alliance in northern Afghanistan. They are one of the organizations in northern Afghanistan waiting very much to take advantage of what the U.S. has done today. David?
Peter, they appear also to have been at least partly in the loop on this. We heard from Dr. Abdullah, the so-called foreign minister of the Northern Alliance, at about 7:30 a.m. Eastern Time, much later in the day here. And he told us that the attacks were imminent, that the attacks were going to come within hours, and asked just how close they were. He told reporters, well, what time is it? Northern Alliance commanders appear to have been poised to take advantage of this. They have been moving their forces primarily toward targets in the north of the country, Mazar-e Sharif, and in the extreme west of the country, Herat, looking to isolate those areas and perhaps break the Taliban control of them.
Do you have any idea whatsoever, David, that the Northern Alliance participated at all today? Did they take advantage of this in any other regard rather than try to move some of their forces forward?
Well, we are told that the folks down in the area just north of Kabul witnessed Taliban troops leaving Kabul, presumably heading towards the front, although in some cases there are reports that they were fleeing the city. And in at least one case, the Northern Alliance commanders shelled those troops in what's called the Shomali Plain, which is a strategic plain just north of Kabul. No return of fire from the Taliban soldiers, so far as we have heard. And we should also mention that as of the latest that we've been able to get in touch with folks in Kabul, the city is now quiet. No sign of attacks, but we are told that these attacks are going to be ongoing for the indefinite future, so presumably we can expect some more.
Many thanks, David Wright, with the Northern Alliance. In fact, the attack on Kabul has been fairly sporadic. There was first an attack, then there was a lull, then another attack. And we have not heard anything from the Pentagon that indicates that this is going to stop this evening. In fact, the Secretary of Defense, as we'll hear in greater detail, said it would continue. But one of the things we do know today is that the United States used airspace over Pakistan to mount these attacks against Taliban and Osama bin Laden targets. Afghanistan is the fragile neighbor to Afghanistan, and ABC's Dan Harris is in Islamabad tonight. Dan, how has the day gone? It started there fairly late in the day.
It did start late in the day, and in contrast to the Northern Alliance, as we heard from David Wright, my colleague, I do not believe that the Pakistani government was in the loop vis-a-vis these airstrikes. When the airstrikes began, we called the foreign ministry, and it was ABC News that informed them the airstrikes had in fact begun. They said they knew the airstrikes were imminent. They didn't know the exact timing. We haven't had a verbal statement yet from the Pakistani governor, from the Pakistani ruling president, the military president, General Pervez Musharraf. We're expecting that in about 6 hours at 10 a.m. local time. He is, Peter, as you know, in an exquisitely difficult position, trying to balance on the one hand the demands of the West, which want him to help fight terrorism, and on the other hand the demands of many Islamics within his own borders who are pro-Taliban and pro-Osama bin Laden.
Dan, the Pakistani ambassador to the United Nations told us earlier today, in fact he read a statement from his government earlier today which said they very much support what the U.S. was doing at this point. Islamabad is sort of an isolated place next to the city of Rawalpindi where many more people live. Have you seen any indication today, one way or the other, of public sentiment?
To pick up on what you're saying about Islamabad, it's really a government town, and in one of the guidebooks on Pakistan it says the nice thing about Islamabad is it's only 15 minutes away from Pakistan. So it is sort of isolated. Rawalpindi, which is about a half-hour away, saw a small protest this evening, nothing major. There has been calls for a jihad or a holy war. In fact, let me read you a quote from one of the leading Islamic clerics. Americans have used their might to kill innocent people in Afghanistan instead of targeting training camps. Another says it's the duty of every Muslim to support their brothers in this critical hour. We will support the Taliban physically and morally. Many analysts inside Pakistan, however, do not expect these cries to be met with any overwhelming response among the Pakistani public who knew these attacks were coming. The response thus far has been generally muted. There have been protests, but by Pakistani standards, these protests throughout the past few weeks have been reasonably controlled and reasonably small, Peter.
Many thanks, Dan Harris in Islamabad. One of the Pakistani military analysts told us earlier today that General Musharraf felt very confident about his authority. And in fact, one of the examples of that today and yesterday was he put under house arrest, one of the leading pro-Taliban Islamic clerics inside Afghanistan. And as far as the military analysts we spoke to there this evening, testing only the public waters, General Musharraf and the Army very much in charge. Let's move a little south in Pakistan now to the city of Quetta, which is very close to the Pakistan-Afghanistan border. This is where a lot of the refugee pressure from Afghanistan has been put on, where many people are fleeing, first of all, famine, and secondly, the bombing in Afghanistan. And ABC's Bob Woodruff is down there tonight. Bob, what's the situation there?
Well, Peter, I think in terms of reaction from the people on the street here, we're going to have to wait for a very crucial piece of information coming out of Afghanistan, and that is casualty figures. What a lot of people on the street have been telling us today is if there are large numbers of civilian casualties in Afghanistan, that will create a significantly different reaction than if there is not. We have gotten a little bit of information on some of the official reaction from some of the various constituencies here. The religious parties, the fundamentalist parties, as you might expect, are outraged by these attacks, and they've called for a general strike tomorrow for businesses to close. The government here in this province of Baluchistan around Quetta have ordered all the schools and universities and colleges to close for the next 3 days. The nationalist parties, as we've said before, who are generally anti-Taliban, extremely anti-Taliban, have also expressed some disappointment with what the U.S. and its allies have done today. They say that it would have been better if the U.S. had waited for the Afghans to act politically on their own and call what is called a Loya Jirga, which is a Grand Council of Afghanistan, to try to determine their own political future first. They did not do that. Now they say, now that these strikes have happened, let's get them over with quickly, and let's get on and have the U.S. help us build a new country of Afghanistan. Peter.
Many thanks, Bob. Bob Woodruff, who's in Quetta on the Pakistan-Afghan border. And my colleagues everywhere, and we caution you that in a turbulent atmosphere like this, you take what everybody says with a grain of salt, because on a day like today, it's very difficult to confirm much, if anything, of what has happened. For example, the Taliban, shortly after these attacks began, did confirm that the homes of Mullah Muhammad Omar, the spiritual leader of the Taliban, and Osama bin Laden had been attacked and hit in the city of Kandahar in the south. But the Taliban says that neither Mullah Omar nor Osama bin Laden were hit or hurt or killed. And one of the things the Secretary of Defense said earlier today was that Osama bin Laden was not specifically a target himself today, which may indicate that they do not know precisely where he is. But it has been a very long day of very aggressive military action by the U.S., joined by Britain. And so we're going to go to the Pentagon and ABC's John McWethy to take us through it. John?
Peter, let's begin telling the story by going back to Thursday night. Defense Secretary Rumsfeld is in Cairo, Egypt. It turns out by then the decision has already been made to go ahead with these strikes. From then on, the pieces begin to fall into place. 8 p.m. yesterday, Eastern Time. A pair of B-2 stealth bombers take off from Whiteman Air Force Base in Missouri. They are refueled several times in their 16-and-a-half-hour flight to Afghanistan. 10 a.m. today, the flight decks of 2 American aircraft carriers come alive with activity. 12:30 p.m. in Washington, airstrikes begin. It is 9:30 at night in Afghanistan. A camera in downtown Kabul shows what resistance there is minimal. It is a powerful strike force, the United States and Britain firing 50 Tomahawk cruise missiles, 2 carriers sending 25 strike aircraft over Afghanistan, and another force of 15 heavy bombers coming from bases on land. Airfields and radar at nearly every major city were attacked, along with dozens of other targets.
To achieve the outcomes we seek, it is important to go after air defense and Taliban aircraft. We need the freedom to operate on the ground and in the air. We have also targeted command facilities for those forces that we know support terrorist elements within Afghanistan and critical terrorist sites.
Plans call for 2 C-17 cargo planes to drop their loads of food and medicine into remote parts of Afghanistan while bombs are falling elsewhere. There are to be more food drops in the days to come. As in previous conflicts, the U.S. is also preparing to drop thousands of leaflets on cities and towns and to beam radio broadcasts into the country, trying to explain that the U.S. war is against terrorism, not against the Afghan people. The bombing, the food drops, and the leaflets are just part of a broader campaign.
The fact is, in this battle against terrorism, there is no silver bullet. There is no single thing that is going to suddenly make that threat disappear.
Strategy is to break down the Taliban's ability to rule, to strengthen the opposition, and to hope that the comfortable safe haven that Osama bin Laden has been living in vanishes and that he and his followers are forced out into the open, Peter. That may be wishful thinking.
John, listening to the Secretary of Defense and other briefings today, it seems clear that what the U.S. is trying to do is open the field for the opposition forces to go and get the Taliban, and that the targets today have been those which might undermine the Taliban's military authority. Fair assessment?
Absolutely fair assessment, to break down their ability to control not only their own forces, but to fight with the opposition that the U.S. now hopes is going to rise up and increase their level of activity.
And do these attacks continue this evening?
As far as we know, they do, Peter. They will be sporadic, but airstrikes will continue, we are told, over the next several days.
And do we know whether or not the humanitarian airdrops are going to be stepped up now that there's so many Afghans on the move?
It is their intention to have a steady flow from the airdrop, Peter. It will not be a huge number of aircraft, but a number of aircraft each night dropping supplies to various pockets where people need it the most.
Now, the Taliban said earlier today that they had shot down one aircraft. Am I correct that no American aircraft has been damaged or downed?
American officials say that no American aircraft has been damaged or downed at this point. We have no indication of that. And of course, the Taliban was not able to mount much of an air defense in the first place.
And John, we've heard a fair amount in the last few days about special operations, U.S., British, perhaps Russian commandos in country for one reason or another. Do we know anything about that today?
We know almost nothing about it, Peter. We know what their job is. We know what they are capable of doing. They are capable of helping the bombers come in on their targets. We do not know for sure whether they are actually in the country. In fact, late last night we were told that all forces had been pulled out of the country.
John, we heard the Secretary of Defense refer to the men and women of the U.S. Command. Do we know of any women participating in the mission today?
In terms of pilots, no, we don't, Peter, but there are definitely women on the aircraft carriers, and there are women pilots in both the Air Force and in the Navy, so it is possible, sure.
John, take a look with me now. I hope you have a monitor, because we're getting now the first pool video from on board at least one of the American aircraft. The armed forces shoot their own video on occasions such as this, do not take the networks along with them. And as we saw in the Gulf War, a lot of explosions, and as we said several times during the Gulf War, especially subsequently when we learned somewhat more about the success and lack of success, that the Pentagon usually releases videotape at this point that tends to show the mission's successes. Have you heard today, John, of anything that indicated that, as far as the Pentagon is saying publicly, anything didn't go according to plan?
We are not hearing any of that, Peter, but I can almost guarantee you that things never go quite according to plan. For example, one of the things we have heard about is the new chairman of the Joint Chiefs said that 30 minutes ago, or 30 minutes after he came before us in the press room, that the first of the humanitarian airdrops had already happened. It now turns out that it was many hours later that the first one happened, and in fact it is still in question. They believe it will happen this evening, but of course they're running out of nighttime in Afghanistan.
Just one last question. Is there any country in the region which gave the U.S. any difficulty in terms of flying through its airspace?
Well, Iran certainly has not given the U.S. permission, but almost every other country on the border has given the U.S. permission to go ahead and use their airspace, at least for humanitarian missions, if not for combat missions.
Okay, many thanks. John McWethy at the Pentagon. There's actually been some fighting breakout on the western border of Afghanistan, according to the Iranian news agency, between Taliban's and locals there. So you get a very small example there of some of the chaos that must have been caused in the country today by these bombing attacks. We're joined by our principal military analyst, Tony Cordesman, again this evening. Tony, just based on the information that we have today, and it is fairly spare at the moment, what sort of an operation does it look like to you?
Well, at this point, Peter, the key is how much damage we did to their air defenses. We know we hit a whole group of bases. We would probably concentrate on their major radars, on trying to get about 40 to 80 combat aircraft, some of which won't be operational, and getting to their heavy surface-to-air missiles, the SA-2, the SA-3. Now, within these urban areas, we'll have hit at their headquarters, their principal facilities, munitions depots, around them, probably at the areas where they keep their armor, some of the major command and control facilities, the assembly areas for their ground troops.
Thanks very much, Tony. Major command and control facilities may somewhat overstated. Even the Secretary of Defense said today they have no Army, no Navy, no Air Force to speak of. They do have an anti-aircraft capacity, some missile capacity, but nobody knew whether or not they were able to operate it. And in terms of targets, one of the targets they did hit, according to reports from Kabul, was the Defense Ministry, which is in downtown Kabul, and the airport in both Kabul and Kandahar. Tony, one more question for you, if I may. The reporting seems to suggest that they're hitting facilities at the airports but not wishing to destroy the actual runways themselves.
It's a very difficult target, Peter, and one that's very easy to repair. But if you take out the sort of radars, remember they have very few assets. So what little command and control capabilities they have, they rely on. If they lose their helicopters, their air transport aircraft, they can't move around Afghanistan.
Okay.
So when we look at this set of assets, what you end up with is very few targets, but if they lose them, they really have no capability to challenge us.
Okay, many thanks. As somebody said earlier today, Tony Cordesman, when asked whether or not there was going to be a no-fly zone over Afghanistan, as there is in northern and southern Iraq, the Secretary much pretty affirmed that if they hit everything they wanted today, nothing would fly in the region, so there was no necessity to actually establish a no-fly zone in any official or legal sense. Two other analysts, military analysts, we'd like to hear from at the moment. First, General Richard Hawley, who joins us tonight, who was the commander of Air Combat Command, which is the largest command in the Air Force. General Hawley, you've watched this all day long. What are your impressions?
Well, it looks to me like we're doing exactly what we should, which is try to take away the instruments of power of the Taliban and get the Al-QAEDA organization and Osama bin Laden on the run. It's very true, as Tony said, there aren't a lot of targets in this country, but those that they have are the ones that they've been using to oppress their population. And if our intelligence was good, if we had a good idea where all of those key assets were before we started this thing earlier today, our time, then we have an excellent chance of accomplishing the objectives that the Secretary of Defense laid out in his statement. I think somebody also asked if this thing had gone without a hitch, and I would agree it's unlikely that it went without a hitch. These things seldom do, but the fact is they're going back again and again and again. And as we learn what we missed, what didn't go so well, we appear to have plenty of opportunity to catch those as we go on through the night.
Okay, thanks very much, General Hawley. Now I want to talk to General Charles Horner, who led the air combat, who ran the air war basically in the Gulf War, excuse me, more than a decade ago. Nice to see you again, General Horner.
Hello, Peter.
Based on your experience, when you go in and you hit a target today, or you think you've hit a target, how quickly do you get a chance to look at what you've done and whether or not you need to go back for a second or even a third time?
Well, I think it depends on the target. If it's an active target like a radar, you probably know right away because it goes off the air. In this case, these targets are low, ill-defined targets, areas, training camps. And so if you do some destruction there, that's fine, but you're not going to know how you did.
And we had a lot of talk about precision weapons during the Gulf War. Many of them didn't turn out to be as precise as advertised. How much better are the systems today than they were a decade ago?
Well, they're probably not as accurate as the laser bombs we used in the Gulf War, but they certainly are a lot more flexible. You can drop from higher altitudes, you can drop through weather, and their accuracy is really a function of how well you can locate the target. I think they're very reliable, and I think, quite frankly, that the reports of miss in the Gulf War were exaggerated.
Okay, thank you very much. Anything you want to add about tonight's operation?
Well, I think we're in for stage one of a long war, and this is going to go on and on.
Okay, many thanks, General Horner and General Hawley, and also ABC's Tony Cordesman, who's our resident military analyst. Now I want to turn to this whole sort of dual track down which the President is trying to move, which is the military attempt to dislodge the Taliban and get whatever is available of the Al-QAEDA network in Afghanistan, and also assist the Afghan people. Now, this is a country which is one of the world's poorest countries, has the lowest intake of food per individual of any country in the world. They've had a horrendous drought for the last couple of years. All the international agencies were expelled from the country on which the Afghan people rely. So this food operation, which the U.S. has simultaneously mounted, is absolutely essential. In Europe tonight, at a location we cannot yet disclose, is ABC's John Cochran, who's been monitoring that facet of this mission. John, what is its intent? What are they going to drop? How much of it? Where and to whom?
Well, they dropped it today in remote parts of Afghanistan, far from Taliban-controlled territory, in part because they didn't want to chance the Taliban air defenses before they'd been knocked out, also to keep this food and other supplies away from the Taliban. We will be seeing more airdrops in the days ahead, possibly as soon as tomorrow, Peter.
Okay, John, thank you very much indeed. By the way, these airdrops, which were food, largely vegetarian meals, and they were enriched with vitamins and minerals. The Secretary of Defense, or one of our briefings, also said they had dropped medicine packets to the Afghans as well. And one of the stunning things we heard today is that they were able to drop them without parachutes. This operation you're looking at in northern Iraq in 1991, in fact, ended up hurting a lot of Kurds when this stuff dropped out of the sky, in many cases on their head. They've apparently refined that system considerably and can drop it, so they say at least, these plastic packets about the size of a hardcover book without doing any particular damage. But as John and others say, they're dropping it tonight as far and as calculatingly away from areas which the Taliban control, so as to sustain the people, many, many, many hundreds of thousands of whom have been on the move. Now let's turn to the home front, as everybody now calls it, and the whole question of domestic security. Because today, the Justice Department, particularly the FBI, altered its mission, at least in the short term, ever so slightly. The FBI on Sunday has urged law enforcement agencies all over the country to move to their highest level of alert since immediately following the attacks on the trade towers and at the Pentagon. And to talk about that, the man who covers the Justice Department for us, ABC's Pierre Thomas. Pierre?
Peter, there's great concern here at the FBI tonight, and the FBI has warned all the U.S. law enforcement in the country to be on the highest state of alert now that the attacks have begun. Sources tell ABC News U.S. intelligence is receiving about 200 threats per day, some of which are believed to be credible. There are intelligence reports that extremists are conducting surveillance on American targets overseas. But those threats have not been specific. No specific times, no specific places.
I believe there will be more attempts, more attacks, and what we want to do is prevent them if we can.
I believe that we could expect the next shoes to drop to be something different than hijacking airplanes. And the reason is because what the terrorists are trying to do is to create a pervasive sense of fear among the American people. The way to do that is to attack us in as many different forms as possible.
U.S. officials say they are taking no chances, increasing security at installations across the U.S., not just at airports, but at some dams, nuclear facilities, and water treatment plants. There is also a project underway to make the windows at the U.S. Capitol more blast-resistant, less likely to shatter. Some U.S. officials say they cannot rule out that there may still be suspected terrorists at large in this country. In the weeks since the attack, the U.S. has continuously received intelligence from a number of overseas and domestic sources that more terrorists who support Osama bin Laden are poised to strike.
I think the real concern is that there's an undiscovered cell here in the United States, and law enforcement is making very small progress towards identifying members of that group where they may be located.
I think now that the strikes have occurred, we'll see even more stringent security.
ABC News has learned that in the past week, the FBI quietly began shifting resources from solving the hijacking assault to preventing more attacks.
The game plan for law enforcement now, Peter, defense. Play lots of defense.
Many thanks, Pierre Thomas, at the FBI tonight. And we are now going to take a sort of broader look at this whole question of the national mood and security. This does not begin to compare to the attacks on the United States almost a month ago, but as we said, it's another day in the national life interrupted in a very dramatic way, even though most people knew it was coming. And in much of the country today, life went on pretty much as as has come to be described as normal in these particular times, people getting about their daily Sunday business. But in many, many places, there was particular tension, and one of them certainly was in New York, and we go to ABC's Ned Potter to bring us up to date on that.
Peter, it is a blustery night here in Lower Manhattan. We're about 3 blocks north of the World Trade Center site. If we had been here a month ago, of course, the towers would have reached out of our picture way above me. We have been told in just the last few minutes that local authorities have moved to what they call Operation Thunderball. And one part of that, at least, is deploying 400 National Guards people at strategic locations around the metropolitan area, such as bridges, tunnels, national monuments, major buildings, and so forth, just to be sure that any potential attackers, no specifics, any potential attackers have a hard time getting at any targets. As I say, there has been nothing absolutely specific, but this is the highest state of alert that the city has faced. Mayor Giuliani, earlier in the day, was still urging New Yorkers to go about their business. Despite earlier suggestions, there has not been any sort of a lockdown in New York City. The mayor said that if there are specific threats, there would certainly be more security than we've seen in the last 4 or 5 days around New York, but not as much as there was, say, around September 12th or 13th. At any rate, a lot of people on the lookout here in New York tonight. Peter?
Many thanks, Ned Potter. As we said, it was a sort of normal Sunday afternoon in many parts of the country. Chants of USA broke out into many football stadiums, the NFL season on and the tail end of the baseball season. There was something of a mixed reaction. Many places in Philadelphia, for example, there was a peace rally going on at the time, and people were seen to express at that rally, you know, why attack hate with hate? But the general sentiment in the country appears to be, certainly if it's followed the polls of the last several days and weeks, that it was time for the United States to strike back at those who struck the United States. But it's been a very emotional day for many people as the United States has become more deeply embroiled in a conflict with Osama bin Laden and the Taliban. And there have been some significant changes on the West Coast. We go to the West Coast now, and ABC's Brian Rooney. Brian?
Well, Peter, I think we should note that a lot of agencies were on heightened security anyway, and it would be difficult to see a difference in anything they're doing today. We're told that there is a somewhat higher security, for instance, at the Air Force Academy in Colorado. The Montana National Guard is posting guards at its facilities. The Coast Guard was already on heightened alert. They are patrolling harbors. They're not doing anything more than they were doing since September 11th. Security, obviously, as we've said before, is still high at airports, and the National Guard has been patrolling the airports since Friday.
The Los Angeles Police Department was placed on tactical alert. Officers on the day shift will stay on duty along with the night patrol. The city's emergency services office is up and running. So far, though, responding to no emergencies. Also in Los Angeles, television's 53rd annual Emmy Awards were canceled. There will be no star-studded parade of self-congratulation for Hollywood tonight.
There was a general feeling of people feeling uncomfortable, people feeling it was not a day to celebrate, certainly not a day to go up there and accept the best supporting actress in a comedy. It seemed like it was trivial.
Some Hollywood studios putting up literally a show of force, parked empty security cars at their front gates.
And Peter, I think we should say that the tension is not felt quite as much here as it is in New York, where the World Trade Center's collapse. There was normal life throughout the West today. As you said before, the full football schedule was played. Barry Bonds played his last baseball game of the season. He hit number 73, 3 over the record.
Okay, Brian Rooney, thank you very much. Nice to have at least one smile today on behalf of Mr. Bond's success. But there's no doubt there is anxiety in the country. The president himself said in his address earlier that he knew that Americans felt fear today. And, of course, many Americans do. Let's check in one other place. Let's go to the Texas State Fair in Dallas, where ABC's Mike Von Fremd has spent the day. Mike, as you wander through the crowds today, what do you pick up?
Peter, as I've wandered through the crowds, I've picked up that many Americans were saying it's about time, and they don't seem to be living in fear. They're very proud of this, Peter, the largest state fair in the country. It's 150 years old. It's estimated that there were 100,000 people here today. They expect 4 million to pass through the gates, and the Texans I've been talking to make a point of saying that they're not afraid to go out of their homes. If Osama bin Laden was hoping to have the people in the president's home state cowering inside their houses, it's not happening here. They're out. There is a bit more security coming through the gates. You now have to open your bags, but the Texans are taking it in stride. They're very proud of the state fair, Peter, and they're determined to come and enjoy it. There's almost also a sense that they want to enjoy every moment they have. There's a new appreciation for it, and it's also been a spectacular day here in Dallas. A good day to get out.
Thanks very much, Mike Montram. That will be music to the president's ears because, of course, ever since September the 11th, the president and all the other political leadership in the country has urged Americans to get back to life and lead life as they normally would, so as not to give the terrorists who attacked the United States another inch. When we come back, we'll hear from the president and some of the other political leadership in the country as well.
An ABC News special, America Fights Back, continues after this message and a word from our ABC stations. This ABC News special continues. Once again from New York, Peter Jennings.
I think everybody knows that since the beginning of this, September the 11th, the Defense Department and the Bush administration generally is asking to be very careful about what it tells the public in terms of the campaign against terrorism, but it's beginning to sort of seep out now. We've had the first reports back from the USS Carl Vinson, which is in the Arabian Sea and participated in today's attacks. The F-14 pilot who led the first sortie from the carrier in the Arabian Sea to Kabul is quoted tonight as saying, "To me tonight was about giving back America the confidence and letting them know, hey, we're out here and we can take care of whatever we need to." And the briefing goes on from the F-14 pilot, who of course cannot be identified, and it stops when he said, it wasn't a knee-jerk reaction like so many people probably expected, said the commander, who said he had wolfed down 4, and that's exactly where the information from the USS Vinson gets cut off, but we'll try to catch up on that as well. Now, we've become so accustomed in the last almost a month to seeing President Bush rallying the nation from the very first day when he got back to Washington and made his first major speech to the nation on the occasion of the attacks in New York and at the Pentagon. And he's been rallying the nation on every occasion to the clear pleasure of the nation. The president continues to have extraordinarily high affirmative ratings in every poll that's taken by everybody in the country. And then today, the president, after a long night and morning of meetings, went to the country one more time to say that this attack had begun.
On my orders, the United States military has begun strikes against Al-QAEDA terrorist training camps and military installations of the Taliban regime in Afghanistan. These carefully targeted actions are designed to disrupt the use of Afghanistan as a terrorist base of operations and to attack the military capability of the Taliban regime. More than 2 weeks ago, I gave Taliban leaders a series of clear and specific demands. Close terrorist training camps, hand over leaders of the Al-QAEDA network, and return all foreign nationals, including American citizens, unjustly detained in your country. None of these demands were met, and now the Taliban will pay a price. At the same time, the oppressed people of Afghanistan will know the generosity of America and our allies. As we strike military targets, we will also drop food, medicine, and supplies to the starving and suffering men and women and children of Afghanistan. The United States of America is a friend to the Afghan people, and we are the friends of almost 1 billion worldwide who practice the Islamic faith. The United States of America is an enemy of those who aid terrorists and of the barbaric criminals who profane a great religion by committing murder in its name. This military action is a part of our campaign against terrorism, another front in a war that has already been joined through diplomacy, intelligence, the freezing of financial assets, and the arrests of known terrorists by law enforcement agents in 38 countries. Today we focus on Afghanistan, but the battle is broader. Every nation has a choice to make. In this conflict, there is no neutral ground. If any government sponsors the outlaws and killers of innocents, they have become outlaws and murderers themselves. And they will take that lonely path at their own peril. We're a peaceful nation. Yet as we have learned so suddenly and so tragically, there can be no peace in a world of sudden terror. In the face of today's new threat, the only way to pursue peace is to pursue those who threaten it. We did not ask for this mission, but we will fulfill it. The name of today's military operation is Enduring Freedom. We defend not only our precious freedoms, but also the freedom of people everywhere to live and raise their children free from fear. I know many Americans feel fear today, and our government is taking strong precautions. All law enforcement and intelligence agencies are working aggressively around America, around the world, and around the clock. In the months ahead, our patience will be one of our strengths. Patience with the long waits that will result from tighter security. Patience in understanding that it will take time to achieve our goals. Patience in all the sacrifices that may come. Today, those sacrifices are being made by members of our armed forces who now defend us so far from home, and by their proud and worried families. A commander-in-chief sends America's sons and daughters into a battle in a foreign land only after the greatest care and a lot of prayer. To all the men and women in our military, every sailor, every soldier, every airman, every Coast Guardsman, every Marine, I say this: your mission is defined, your objectives are clear, your goal is just. You have my full confidence, and you will have every tool you need to carry out your duty. The battle is now joined on many fronts. We will not waver, we will not tire, we will not falter, and we will not fail. Peace and freedom will prevail.
The battle has now been joined unquestionably. In a little while, we'll hear from Osama bin Laden, who pre-recorded a message and wants very much now to have the world see this as a struggle between Islam and the rest of the world, particularly the United States. But the president going out of his way again, he's done it every single time, to say that this was an attack by twisted people, to a profane attack, he called it, on a great religion, and he's gone out of his way time and time again also to say this is not an attack on the Afghan people, but on a government which he and many Afghans do not believe represents them. In a moment, we'll talk to our White House correspondent, Terry Moran, about what the mood has been like there over the last 12 or 14 hours. But first, we're joined by Congressman Richard Gephardt, who is the Democratic leader in the House of Representatives. Good evening, sir. You were apparently watching Cal Ripken play his last baseball game last night when the White House tracked you down. Who tracked you down, and what did they say?
Well, the Camp David switchboard did, and the president talked to me, and I'm sure he talked to the other three leaders in the House and the Senate, and he told me what was going to happen today, that he was going to talk to the people today on television, and gave us a heads up of what has gone on. We support this. I think the whole Congress, Democrats and Republicans, are really not Democrats and Republicans on this. We're all Americans, and we hope and pray that this and other missions will be accomplished with success.
Have you been kept in the loop today in terms of being briefed about the operations itself, and do you know how well it's going?
Well, I've talked to some of the folks in the White House, and we have some sense of what's happening, but frankly, probably the information that you're getting out on your network and other networks is probably more up to date, because you've got correspondents in Afghanistan and other parts of the world. This is, you need to remember, Peter, this is the first step. This is going to be a long campaign, and it's on many fronts. It's financial fronts, diplomatic, political. Military is just one part of it. It's isolated, it's targeted at the right people, and I think we're going to succeed, but we got to be patient, we got to be unified, and we have to have resolve. Now, tomorrow's a work day and a school day for most Americans. Based on what you know today, would you advise Americans to go about their business normally? Absolutely. We've got to have vigilance. We've got to be careful. But we've got to resume normal life in this country. If we all go down our basements and hide, then the terrorists have won. They really want us to be fearful. All of our security forces, the Army, the police, are on full alert. So I'm confident that we'll get through this. These folks aren't magical. They don't have supernatural powers. It takes them a long time to plan events. I think we're safe. We just need to be careful, and we'll get through this fine.
It's not quite a regular day tomorrow. Tomorrow's Columbus Day, and you were originally scheduled to come to New York City. Do you still intend to come?
I sure do. I'm going to be there with the Speaker of the House. We're going to have about 20 CEOs and some labor leaders. We're going to be talking about getting this economy moving again, and I'm looking forward to those meetings with the Speaker of the House.
Now, Mr. Gephardt, you and the President and others have urged Americans constantly since the 11th of September to get on with normal life, but there's no doubt Americans are still anxious. Do you feel absolutely secure about travel in the country? And secondly, what is your take on the impact that this will have on the economy, given that it has been struggling even more since the 11th?
Well, I think people are safe, and I think we hope that they will resume normal activity. We have stepped up security in airports, train stations, all kinds of facilities are on alert. The law enforcement in this country does a great job, and I'm convinced that people are not unsafe. They should resume normal activity. If they were planning a trip, planning on doing something in business, they ought to go ahead and do it. As to where we're going to be in the future, I really think we're going to get through this. I do not feel that the economy is going to be hurt by this. I think Americans are patriotic. They don't want these terrorists to defeat us by stopping from doing normal business activity. The market's been going up the last week. I think people are going to stay out there and do their patriotic duty, which is doing normal things that they would be doing anyway.
At least you hope so. Thank you very much, Congressman Gephardt, the Democratic leader in the House of Representatives, coming to New York tomorrow. Would you please New Yorkers for the annual Columbus Day celebrations. Now let's go back to the White House, to Terry Moran, our White House correspondent. Terry, what's it been like around there today, to put it very simply, and where's the Vice President?
The second question I have a short answer to. I don't know. They aren't telling us. What I can tell you is that the Vice President has been taken to a safe and secure and undisclosed location, as is now the custom. We are told these are security precautions that were put in place on September 11th, and they are described as logical. So the Vice President is, for the time being, going to be separated from the President for security reasons. The mood here, I suppose I'd describe as locked down, really. This is a White House that has never been particularly overly generous with behind-the-scenes background information, and things got shut down even more today. And it's partly for reasons of state, not just to try to manage the flow of information, because the communications people here and the National Security Advisor here, Condoleezza Rice, knows that anything that comes out of the White House will echo around the world. So, for example, who the President called today, which world leaders, and who he didn't call, could resound in ways that they want to manage. I can tell you some of those leaders, the traditional allies. He called President Putin very early on. He called Prime Minister Chrétien of Canada, Chirac of France, leaders in the Middle East, Prime Minister Sharon of Israel, and President Mubarak of Egypt. And so he did make a round of those calls, but that was a delicate issue, just releasing that. The other thing that I would describe here...
Can I stop you just
absolutely.
for a second? The President did say in his speech that, to use his words, other close friends, including Canada, Australia, Germany, and France, have pledged forces as the operation unfolds. Do we know what that means?
We don't at the moment. Those kinds of operational details are not being shared, but one of the things that was described to us was a positive eagerness, we were told, by leaders around the world to get involved in this campaign in one way or another. And the closest allies of the country are going to participate, as you point out, militarily. Should also say the President spoke with Lord Robertson of the NATO alliance, which has invoked its treaty chapter, saying that an attack on one is an attack on all.
Do you know, Terry, whether or not the President had to particularly impress upon anybody, and in this case I guess I'm thinking of the so-called moderate Arab leaders, I'm thinking of President Mubarak of Egypt particularly, that this was a mission which they should support overtly? There's been very little forthcoming from the Arab world today of a positive nature, other than from Jordan.
And that, Peter, is the heart of the matter here. The response of responsible governments and responsible leaders throughout the Arab and Muslim worlds. It is really where so much of President Bush's and his administration's efforts have been to try to convince them and their people that this is a war, as he's put it, against terrorism and not against Islam, and the lack of a response and some of the mixed responses that have come from places like Iran so far must be of some worry to the officials here.
But I gather the Iranians have told the administration sort of behind the door that it was okay to go and attack the Taliban. They actually approved of it no matter what they said in public.
And they have a long history with the Taliban. They're deeply opposed to the Taliban ruling in Afghanistan for geostrategic and ethnic reasons. But there's no question that officials here have made clear to us that whatever we hear from governments in the Arab and Muslim world publicly, there may be contacts privately with those governments which are more productive from the U.S. point of view.
Let me ask you just one last question. President Clinton, former President Clinton, said a little while ago, a very honest admission, that he was obsessed with Osama bin Laden. And we see Osama bin Laden today, we'll see it at length in a minute, in a message trying to establish this as the Muslim world versus the rest of the world led by the United States. Have you any idea how President Bush regards this mission against bin Laden and the Taliban in a personal way?
Well, Peter, what I can tell you, sort of reading between the lines of his public appearances when he's asked about bin Laden, he doesn't have a poker face. One can read him, and he does dismiss the questions usually with a look of contempt. He's very careful, as is this administration, not to personalize this conflict, George W. Bush versus Osama bin Laden. But there's no question he does have a degree of contempt for this individual and these actions. I would also say one other thing about the president is when he got back to the White House after coming back from Camp David and a firefighters memorial this morning, we were told he took a walk out on the South Lawn with his dog and knocked some putts around on the putting green. He is, in some ways, a very cool customer after making a decision. He said it himself. He doesn't like to look back.
Many thanks, Terry. Terry Moran at the White House. As President Truman said, every president needs a dog. Because may sometimes be the only friend you have in Washington. Certainly that is not the case with President Bush at the moment. As you looked at that video, that's not the video that was released today of Osama bin Laden, but it does give you a clear indication of another character who's very much in evidence today, which is a man named Dr. Ayman al-Zawahiri, who is the head of Islamic Jihad in Egypt, the man sitting there on the right. As I said, we'll look at this at length in a moment, but these are a combination of talent, one can say, that has presented an extraordinary challenge to the rest of the world, each other's mentors in some way in the fine art of violence, and trying at least to incite the Muslim world. Now let's reach out to the rest of the world. No sooner had President Bush spoken today than the British Prime Minister, Tony Blair, spoke to the British people. And let's go to London now for Britain and the rest of Europe, and ABC's Richard Gisbert. Richard.
Well, Peter, so far Washington will be pleased to hear what its coalition partners in Europe are saying. Right across this continent, European leaders went on their respective national television channels today to explain to their people why it is that they're siding with Washington in this war. Britain's Prime Minister in particular said that British forces are already involved because of what happened in the United States on September the 11th.
This atrocity was an attack on us all, on people of all faiths and people of none. We know the Al-QAEDA network threatened Europe, including Britain, and indeed any nation throughout the world that does not share their fanatical views.
Not everyone is convinced. A small group of anti-war protesters gathered outside the Prime Minister's home tonight, and some Londoners fear the airstrikes will just make things worse.
I think it's going to grow terrorism. It's not going to defeat it.
I believe there'll be a lot of terrorism in London especially. A lot of suicide bombers, things like that, to be honest.
No, I think we'll win, and that'll end it.
In Berlin, Chancellor Gerhard Schroeder quickly assured Washington of Germany's unqualified support. He also said Germany would contribute militarily if and when it is asked. The French often oppose American foreign policy and U.S. military interventions overseas. But not this time, said President Chirac tonight. France says it's just a matter of time before its forces are also taking part. The Kremlin says that President Bush personally informed Russian President Vladimir Putin of the airstrikes before they began. So far, Putin has been quite supportive, but that could change if casualties among Afghan civilians turn out to be high and Russian public opinion turns against the war. Now, coalitions are hard to build. They are harder still to maintain. As of now, this one looks solid, but it is much too early to know, Peter, how long that will last.
John, people in the United States, I think, are generally thrilled at the support that Prime Minister Blair has given President Bush. Some people are also puzzled at why he wishes to be so visible on this particular issue. He went to Pakistan the other day, and he's spoken almost as often to the public as has President Bush. Is there something that he has personally about this that we may be missing?
Well, I think a lot of British people have been really taken aback by the support that Tony Blair has given Bush on this, because you have to understand that Tony Blair is from the liberal side of the Labour Party, and there has been a latent anti-American sentiment amongst his constituency. Some of the language that he's been using, he's been actually out front of the U.S. president, and I think that although there is an enormous amount of sympathy here in the United Kingdom for the victims in the United States on September 11th, there's also a little bit of disquiet, a little bit of concern about Tony Blair and how out front he is, and how that could eventually make Britons a target in this struggle.
Okay, many thanks very much, Richard Gisbert in London. One other thing, of course, about Britain, it's had its own experience and continues to have its own experience with terrorism. Just a couple of days ago, a journalist in Northern Ireland was murdered by Protestant extremists, and Britain has a long history of difficulty with the IRA. It is probably true in Britain and other parts of Europe that the public is somewhat more relaxed about terrorism on their soil than we have found ourselves to be in the last month, in large measure, I think, because they've had a vastly greater experience with terrorism in their soil than have we in the United States. Now let's go to the Middle East, because no discussion of a campaign involving the Muslim world or Muslim terrorists or Afghanistan, however you wish to call it, can be had without talking about Israel and the Palestinians. Osama bin Laden said, among other things today, that Americans will not be safe until Palestinians in the Palestinian territories are safe from attack by the Israelis. Our Jerusalem bureau chief is Gillian Finley, who is in Jerusalem tonight. Gillian, first of all, would you take us through the day in terms of reaction to this U.S. attack on the Taliban?
Well, Peter, the Israeli government was the first to react, not in the form of the Prime Minister, but in the form of the Foreign Minister, Shimon Peres. And he came out fairly early on. He commended President Bush, calling this a right and courageous decision. I'm sure that America will win, not because of its military supremacy, but because of its moral judgment, he said. And I think this went some way to perhaps smoothing over some of the tension that's existed in that relationship between Washington and Israel over the last couple of days. The Palestinians officially have not yet responded at all, and I think that is very significant. Yasser Arafat has not said anything officially. Every PA official we have tried to reach tonight to get a reaction to this has either hung up on us or not answered their telephone. Clearly, they understand the sensitivity of this. This war is not a popular war on the street here. Rightly or wrongly, many Palestinians, many Arabs, but in particular many Palestinians, see this as building towards a war against Islam, even though they understand all the caveats that have been said against that. And they do not want to see ordinary Afghanis, ordinary Muslims being hurt. And that we had somebody out in the streets of Ramallah tonight, and that's what she heard repeatedly from people who'd been watching this on the Arab satellite networks here, that this is not a good thing, that this is pure aggression, that this is what they blame America for in its foreign policy, and they are not happy to see this happening tonight.
Gillian, have you seen anything or heard anything today which would indicate that that the power centers in Israel or in the Palestinian territories feel that this is the moment for greater restraint than either side has exercised in recent days?
Well, certainly both sides have been under tremendous pressure, American pressure, in the last, since September 11th, to exercise restraint. And as we know, that not a lot of restraint has been exercised. However, this weekend, Yasser Arafat has said more publicly than he has ever said in the last year that the attacks from the Palestinian side must stop, that people who perpetrate them will have to face some sort of justice. And in fact, he has in fact started arresting some people. This is what the Israelis had insisted that he do for many, many weeks now. The question is, will this be enough? Will this be enough to convince Israel that it too should show restraint, that it should not retaliate perhaps in the same way that it has retaliated? Many Palestinians have been killed in the last number of weeks as they've been trying to get this ceasefire off the ground.
Okay, many thanks, Gillian. Gillian Finley, our bureau chief in Jerusalem. There was, by the way, a Palestinian suicide bomber in northern Israel today. Guy walked up to a kibbutz in northern Israel. A car came out to ask him or apprehend him what was going on. He blew himself up and killed the Israeli who was in the car. That's the first in almost a month, but it's a very stark reminder of what the Israelis live with and to what length some Palestinians will go. And as Gillian Finley says, very difficult for Yasser Arafat, or has been very difficult for Yasser Arafat, to restrain some of the most extremist forces which operate out of the Palestinian territories. It's just past the first hour of our broadcast, so in case you are just joining us, the United States, joined by Britain today, in a minor way, has mounted a very extensive, ongoing campaign against targets in Afghanistan. There are the bare details. 15 land-based bombers were used, all U.S., 25 strike aircraft launched from both land bases and aircraft carriers in the Arabian Sea. That at least 50 Tomahawk cruise missiles were fired from American ships, and we know that the British launched at least one, perhaps more, cruise missiles from one of their submarines. We've seen the very first video, which doesn't tell us very much about the early attack on Kabul itself, and the pilot who led the raid, flying an F-14 off one of the carriers, said one of the things they were out there doing was to show the world that the United States was in action and would not succumb to the terrorist attacks which were made in the United States on the 11th of September. Now, for further enlightenment, I hope, we're joined also in Washington tonight by two senators who watch this particular thing very carefully. On the left, Senator John Warner, the Republican, the ranking Republican on the Senate Armed Services Committee, and on the right, the Republican Senator John McCain. Senator Warner, if I may, let me begin with you. What do you know so far that perhaps we don't?
Yes, very good. Peter, I'm sorry you cut out as you posed the question.
Okay, or somebody interrupted. It happens to us all the time, Senator. What do you, sir, perhaps know that we do not about this operation?
Well, Peter, I received a call from Secretary Rumsfeld early this morning, and I just, within the past few minutes, talked to the Deputy Secretary. We're very proud here in America of our President and his ability to put this coalition together, and the risks that are being assumed tonight by the men and women of the armed forces. They're carrying out a mission. Thus far, the reports are that the goals are being achieved, that goal being primarily to lay the foundation for such further military action as is likely to be necessary to bring a realization to the Taliban government that they cannot harbor these terrorists.
Are you happy, sir, with the parameters of the mission? And do you believe, we get this impression at least today, that one of the intentions of the U.S. is to open the way, open the door for other Afghan forces on the ground to go after a weakened Taliban?
Peter, as my good friend John McCain and I would say, those of us that have been associated and privileged to be in the military through the years, we don't express happiness or unhappiness. We're just solid people who know that our military tonight are doing the right thing. And absolutely, to the extent that we can, as a part of laying the foundation, enable the existing forces of the North to take a more active role and a more aggressive role towards the Taliban government, and particularly bin Laden and his forces. They probably know more than most of us as to where they are. You bet we're behind them.
And so you believe, sir, do you, if I understand your answer correctly, that part of the aim here is to make it easier for the coalition, for the forces in the North, what's called the Northern Alliance, to gain control of the country?
I don't know that I'd go so far as to gain control of the country. If the Taliban government fails, then I think the coalition of nations that our presidents put together have got to figure out what's next in terms of a form of government. But clearly, as you know, the Russians have given them arms and equipment, and we're trying to, should we say, get the air bases and other things secured so that they can make further advances on their own.
Well, let me turn now to your, as you describe him, your good friend John McCain, Senator John McCain, Republican senator who happens to be in Phoenix tonight, not in Washington, his home state of Arizona. Senator McCain, have you heard anything so far that makes you worried at all about either the status of the operation or the solidity of the coalition?
Nothing. In fact, I've been encouraged by particularly our European friends. The moderate Arab states seem to be holding together, and I'm unaccustomed to saying this, but not only the British and the Canadian and our other European allies, but also the French have been very supportive. So far, I'm very pleased.
I think all of us, sir, today see and hear what the administration is trying to do in the short run. Weaken the Taliban, destroy what remnants there are or what facets there are of the Al-QAEDA network in Afghanistan, if there are any on this particular given day. What do you think the longer-term goal is?
Well, let me say, first of all, the Taliban government is akin to Pol Pot. I mean, they're a radical extremist group of people who are bad for Afghanistan and bad for the world. So I think they have to leave the scene. I think that our goal and the rest of this situation is now, after the Taliban are overthrown, after bin Laden is taken care of and his network within Afghanistan, will be the next countries that harbor terrorists, and they're going to have to make a choice. And that choice has clearly got to be that they will not ever again engage in that kind of activity or harbor terrorist organizations. Otherwise, they pay a price, and that's when the coalition will be strained, because there will be those who will say, now bin Laden's gone, the Taliban's been overthrown, everything's okay. That's when the strains will emerge.
There's a lot of assumption today, actually, that these attacks on the Taliban are going to dislodge the Taliban. You watch these matters pretty closely. Should we assume that the Taliban is out of there after this attack?
Not after this attack. I believe that the Taliban will be overthrown, though, over time. Not after these attacks, as John Warner said, are just the opening ground laying for further operations, and it's the logical first step by reducing and neutralizing any possible anti-air capabilities they had, which were rudimentary at best, as you know.
Now, let me ask you both the question. It's the delicate political question always of the moment. When do you think, first Senator McCain, then Senator Warner, it will be appropriate for the Congress to exercise some oversight of the U.S. military operation? Senator McCain?
I think as long as the Congress has felt that they're well informed about what's going on and that things are going well, I don't feel any urgency to getting into too much of the oversight of this situation, at least in the short term. I'm gratified at the degree of bipartisanship that has been displayed. I think there will come a time sooner rather than later that we have to look very carefully at why we were not better prepared for these attacks that took place on September 11th.
Thanks, Senator McCain. The final word from you, if you would, Senator Warner, on this question of congressional oversight.
Sure. John McCain's right on target, and of course, he and I know the intelligence there. We've got to do a much better job. But I tell you, in my 23 years in the Senate, I've never seen better and more timely consultation with the leadership in the Congress than under the Bush administration. They've been right on target. Twice, 3 times today that I've talked to the Pentagon about it, as well as yesterday. Our committee, on which John McCain and I serve, has the primary responsibility for the overview of our men and women of the military. And indeed, we take into consideration all aspects, not only their welfare and their armaments, but what are the policies by which the President and the Secretary of Defense and others direct them